Hey guys, it's Jeff from San Diego Seed Company. We are back in the garden. Actually, I'm at our dining room outdoor table right now with a tray of onions because we are talking about onions today. Mainly how to start them in cells. If you're going to start them indoors or outdoors, this method is going to work both the same. And also how to transplant them from a cell. You'll notice that I've got these packed in there, multiple per cell, which may go against most of the seed starting information you've heard, where you want to get it down to 1 per cell. Onions are a little bit different. I'm going to get into all that, everything that you're going to need to know to grow your own bulbing or bunching or green onions. But before we get into all that, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell so you're notified anytime we put out new content. So, okay, let's just talk about some of the basics of onions. Onions are cool season crops, and there are two different types of onions. My neighbor just started playing music. I thought somebody was screaming. Okay, I gotta get my focus back. So let's talk a little bit about onion basics. We actually have another video where we harvested our onions last summer where we go in depth into short day versus long day, but I'll just give you the rule of thumb now. If you're below the 37th parallel, you're gonna wanna plant short day onions. If you're above the 37th parallel, you're going to want to plant long day onions. So we have here a tray of 4 different types of onions. We've got the red rock, red bulbing onion, cipollini, which is also red, the yellow granix, and then bunching onions, the evergreen bunching. Regardless of the type of onion, but we're also talking any allium, so chives, shallots, things like that. You can always use this method with those plants as well. It's not just for onions. We do our normal seed starting technique, except instead of putting a hole, I leave about a ½ inch of space at the top. I cover the top with seeds. I'm talking like 10, 15 seeds per cell, and then cover that with soil. And what you get is something like this. Most of them have popped up. If I had to guess, there's probably 10 in here. And we're gonna actually split these before we go into the garden. Now, why can we do that with onions and not tomatoes? It's all about the types of roots that they put out. These roots are just very forgiving. You can separate them. They're kind of built to grow close together. So it's no problem, as you'll see when we go out in the garden, when we separate them. We're not hurting the plant, and we're actually saving a lot of space. Just imagine if I had to plant 64 or 128 onions, 1 per cell. That would take up a lot of space. This is space saving, and it's the way that I've been doing it for years. Okay, so the first step, I'm gonna rake this area flat. This does 2 things. Get it flat so the water isn't pooling and running off, but also I don't want big old pieces of mulch that I didn't get cleared, so I'm gonna rake this one more time to get everything as smooth as possible. Okay, so now we're ready to separate. Okay, so here are the only tools that you need. Your hands and a stick. Now you can go out and buy a fancy thing that's meant exactly for this. I think it's called a dauber. You guys can look that up. But I just grab a stick, and all the stick is used for is for making holes, which I'll show you in a second. But let's take one of these cells, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to separate these. Now I kind of let the soil dry out just a little bit, just so it's easier. But as you can tell, this soil is just falling apart. Now part of that is just I'm using great soil. These are pretty young, so here's my first tip is you don't want to let them get too big because it does just make it a little more tricky to separate the onions out. But as I just lightly move my thumbs across the soil, it starts to break up, and then you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 onions from 1 cell. The next important tip is I don't want to separate all of these all at once and just let these set out and bake in the sun. So I'm just going to do 1 cell at a time and then plant these so they get into the moist soil and don't dry out and die. Okay, so I've got my stick. I'm just going to go down the tube here and make a hole every about 4 inches. I know these emitters are 9 inches apart, so I'm gonna kind of use that as my guide and just keep going down. I'm just going deep enough to give the roots some space to grow out. This is the same method that you would use to transplant something. The only difference here is there's just no soil. Think of it like planting a bare root tree in January. This is doing the same just with onions. So let me count my holes. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I got 3 more. So now, you guessed it, we're going to put these in. These are the red onions. You can tell because it's kind of got a red tint at the top of the white part. This particular one, the roots actually grew through a piece of mulch, which is totally fine. I'm just going to put that down in the ground. I'm afraid if I try to get that mulch out of there, it's just going to break the roots, and that's not what we want, because then the plant will die. So I'm going to plant these up to the depth of the white part, right where I see the purple start to show, or the red, and just pack them in there. We're just trying to get the greenery to be as upright as possible. Now you guys will find out the best method that works for you, but for me, I do this little twist method. It just seems to help those roots go down into the soil better and not get caught on the sides of the hole. Let's talk about a couple more things before I go and plant the rest of this tray. So first of all, one thing that you may want to look out for is the need to prune. Now these onions are completely fine. They're the perfect size, like 3 to 4 inches to plant out. If you let your plants go too long, it's not the end of the world. You can still transplant them. But if you have any greenery falling over and hitting the ground, trim it back. So you can literally just pick off the end down to 3 or 4 inches. It's not going to hurt the plant. What it's going to do is take some of that weight off of the leaf so it doesn't hit the ground. If enough of the leaves hit the ground, it's going to tell the plant that it's time to harvest, and it's going to change what it's doing, and it's not going to keep growing. So the last thing that you want is greenery hitting the ground. Now the next thing is just a clarification. When I was planting them out, I said 4 inches. I've always planted onions 4 inches apart and got big beefy onions. If you look at our seed packs, or whatever seed pack you're planting from, it may say 5 to 6 inches. All that is going to do is give you bigger onions. So if you want big onions, go 5, 6, 7 inches. If you want more onions at a smaller size, you can plant them. I wouldn't go any less than 4 inches, but that 4 to 5 inch range, it's going to give you medium-sized onions. Now that is for bulbing onions, which are the Granax, Cipollini, or the Red Rock. I've also got the evergreen bunching. We've got Tokyo in there. The bunching onions are down to 3 inches. So these are not going to bulb. You're really growing them for the tops so they can get planted a lot closer together. And finally, let's talk days to maturity and when to harvest. If you look at the seed pack, it says about 165 days, give or take 5 days. Now if you know me, I use the days to maturity as more or less a guideline. I would never plant on a specific day and then harvest 165 days after. I'm looking for a few more things to show me that the plant is ready. For onions, the rule of thumb is if half of the greenery has died back and started to dry out, you probably got some really nice onions under the ground. You can also look at the neck of the onion, the part where the leaves attached to the bulb. If that is starting to brown and flake away, you're ready to harvest. Okay, so just a couple more things to know. If you guys watched the garlic video, you may have recognized the bed that I planted those in. Now, why did I plant the garlic next to the onions? It's because they both have a really long growing season. So as I mentioned, bulbing onions are 165 days. So here's what you need to think about. Where are you going to plant your spring crops? I would not put onions and garlic anywhere that you want to have space ready for the spring, for the warm season crops, because it's November 15th today, December, January, February, March, April, like well into May, like probably May 1st is right around the time that these are going to be ready. So in May, yeah, you could still plant some warm season crops, but it's going to be your second or third succession planting of maybe a tomato or another quick growing crop. So just keep in mind where you plant them. That is going to affect your garden space when it comes springtime.